I'm joined by Gene Deckerhoff, who recently announced his retirement after, 48 years of basketball and football since 79.
79, yeah, that's 43 years. Coming up on year 49, and I had made the decision to retire, and had contacted, Caleb Swan at Learfield Seminole Sports Properties, who coordinates all the media for FSU under contract, and contacted Mike Alford and said, Mike, I've made the decision, I'm going to step down. And he said, and anyway, we had a great conversation, and that was when the decision was made. And Chuck Walsh called me that evening and said, Gene, he says, it's going to be 49 or 50 years for you doing basketball. Chuck works sports information at Florida State. I said, Chuck, I've turned in my resignation. Retirement, and I'm not going to broadcast Florida State basketball in the 2022-23 season. No, Gene, you can't do that. I said, well, but 48 years is, it's time. It's like when I talked to Caleb Swan, I said, it's time, and it is time, and stepping aside, got to still stay involved in a little of play-by-play, but you're not going to have a couple of games a week. You're not going to have the other responsibilities, television shows, daily minutes, pre-game shows, etc. It's just going to be strictly play-by-play. And so you say, oh boy, that's a piece of cake. Well, 8 to 10 hours a game getting ready for the broadcast. It's still going to be work, but it's not going to be 70, 80 hours of work and then travel and do a football game. So in a way, I don't want to say that it's semi-retirement because I'm still doing a professional job, but I'm going to feel absolutely retired, to be honest with you.
Yeah. So what are you going to do?
Going to do a little traveling. Spend a little time out back. Ann's got a ton of projects for me, so I'll be working on those. And it seems like we get one project done, there's the next. But that's the way it is. And Ann wants to travel, and we're going to do some traveling. I look at our trips this fall to Tampa as like a long distance date with my wife. Because she's going to go with me. She just won't go to the games, and we've got 10 home games. Maybe 11 home games, I think, now because of the expanded regular season schedule.
You got Brady back.
And Tom Brady is back. I got 5 fingers, Tom. I only have 2 Super Bowl rings, so we need another one. I got 3 sons, and yeah, that's going to be quite an experience. And I made the decision just after coming home from New York City, Jerry. Mm-hmm. We had lost, had not played well against Syracuse, and came home. We got home, late that evening, and Ann and I talked about it on the trip. She came, picked me up at the airport, and we're talking. And she says, it's been a long, long season. She says, you still want to do this? And I said, well, let's think about it. And a long weekend, and Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and all right, it's time to make the decision. She said, you better make it soon because it's almost April. And I said, to be fair with Florida State, with Learfield, give the university time to select the next voice of the Seminoles. Right. And so you can't wait till September and say, I'm not going to do it. And, good Lord willing, good health, hopefully, and maybe lose a pound or 2 here, Jerry, and keep doing a little bit, keep my fingers in the play. And I'm not going to be a stranger. I fully hope to get that war chant going. I don't know about football games this fall, but maybe in the future, be able to go to the stadium. But I do know this, basketball and baseball, maybe sneak in to see Lonnie's softball team a little bit, but I'll be able to pick and choose what I want to do when I want to get that war chant going. And I won't be on a schedule, Jerry, which to me already, that's the best thing that's happened to me in a long time.
You have been on an unbelievable schedule. Yeah. So will you do some play-by-play?
Oh, yeah, with Tampa Bay. We're going to win another Super Bowl. Absolutely. Have you looked at the schedule, though? You got Green Bay, Packers, Kansas City Chiefs. Oh, my goodness. Dallas Cowboys in Dallas, Cleveland. I mean, they just got Deshaun Watson. Oh, my goodness. That's what happens when you win a division. You play that tough schedule the rest of the way. And, oh, by the way, the NFC West is in the rotation for this year. And golly, San Francisco 49ers, that's San Fran, LA Rams at home. They beat us 3 times in a row. I'm going to keep my fingers in it. It's like, if you're a watch repairman or a television repairman, which my dad was, even when he was retired, he kept tinkering with those TV sets, So I'll be tinkering with play-by-play.
Okay. Will you be doing any for FSU at all?
No. Okay. There's a new voice will be announced soon. Well, they're gonna. It's going to be a national search. I've got some ideas. I don't know if I'll have any input, but we'll just leave it at that. No, I can't see it. Number one, but what venue would that be? I'd have to start my own radio station because iHeart's got exclusive, flagship status for the Florida State Seminole, any sport. So the options are limited.
Yeah. Let's talk about some of your favorite memories.
All right, I got a lot of them.
Let's talk about on-air memories. What are some of your? Let's start with your favorite call.
Favorite call, the punt Ruski for a long time was number one, but it got moved down to number two when Kelvin Benjamin made that tremendous catch as time was running out to beat Auburn for the BCS National Championship. That's number one. Number two, obviously, the punt Ruski, Leroy Butler just going into the NFL Pro Football Hall of Fame. Tremendous Leroy Butler. And, when I think of Leroy Butler, punt Ruski always comes to mind, number two play. And I should put in a play that I haven't, but Leroy Butler, as a defensive back for the Seminoles in 1989, picked off Gino Toretto's very first pass attempt and returned it to about the 21-yard line. And the very next play, Dexter Carter scored a touchdown on a little toss pitch. And that's when Leroy went to the Hall of Fame. I said, "Well, great for Leroy," but the punt Ruski always won. But then that catch, and I remember Burt Reynolds was in our booth,
right,
and he fell off of his chair. He fell off. We were sitting on stools. It was a temporary press box at the time, a lot of plywood around, and he fell off his stool. I mean, you listen to the play-by-play, and you could hear Burt very clearly. And that was Burt Reynolds, still making a lot of movies at the time. That was 1989. Short, I guess, after Smokey and the Bandit, but those plays. And then the one that obviously it's, to me, to have Charlie Ward and Warwick Dunn involved in the same play to produce the decisive touchdown against the Florida Gators in Gainesville in that marvelous 1993 year that was our championship year. We had to beat Florida, and they had us on the ropes. Yeah. If we have to go 1-2-3 punt, they had a chance to make it a one-possession ball game. And that play broke a lot of orange and blue hearts, and that's the separation call. That's number 3 all time for me. And the fact you have Charlie Ward and his roommate, Warwick Dunn, Heisman Trophy winner, first round draft pick on the connecting end of those plays. That was just, to me, a phenomenal. Kermit Whitfield, I got to put Kermit's 100-yard kickoff return against Auburn. You know what? For some reason, the catch has dominated my memory banks for all these years, and I was watching a highlights package just Friday night on Channel 6, and they had that Kermit. I said, I have got to include that. And one that I've there's a bunch of them. PK Stamps catch against the Gators. Ron Preston 3-2-1 touchdown after touchdown, the tying touchdown in the Choke-a-Doke game in 1994. And those were the top 5 or 6. And
you want to perform one of those?
No, number 10, number 11 and a half, I used to say, was Scott Bentley, our kicker, on a point after touchdown try where we're just clobbering Clemson and we've got them shut out, and their defensive back picks up the ball and it's returnable for you can score 2 points and deny the shutout. And Scott Bentley, I've never seen a kicker run that fast. Jared, you used to remember that. He ran down that guy and made the tackle about midfield, and that enabled. So that's like 10 and a half or 11 and a half on my top 10 list of plays. But those are some great plays.
Would you care to perform one?
Chris Winke's throw to, I think it was Snoop Menace against the Gators, 99-yard from the end. He went back in the end zone, dropped back, and hit that ball right on his hip. And next thing you know, he's throwing. And, there was another one similar to that, Lawrence Dawsey against the Florida Gators. And it was not, it was Casey Weldon, I think, threw that pass. And so that would have been a little earlier than the Winky throw to Snoop. But, those are good. Touchdown FSU! Touchdown Florida State! As many times. I made an error. Rob Wilson, Florida State Associate Sports Information, Director of Athletics for Sports Information. I may have gotten the title wrong there, Rob. But he asked me, he said, how many times? I said, well, I said 22-18. And on my website, it said 2175, and I went back and did the math. I had added another 43 touchdowns that I had already had the correct number, but I added 43 and told Rob 2218. If you take 43 away from that, it's 2175. That's the correct number of touchdown Florida States. I have no idea how many. Noles win! Noles win! Noles win! Michael Snare beats Duke. I mean, I don't know how many times I've said that, or Slam Dunk City. It's amazing. I began my career at Florida State as a basketball announcer,
Right.
and I still consider myself a basketball announcer. I love broadcasting college basketball.
Well, you played the game,
Yeah,
right?
I played junior college. I played high school and junior college. I scored 32 points in a game. I mean, that's big stuff. That record held for about 5 years. Then a guy that went to the NBA, he scored about 60 or so. So. But yeah, but back in the day, that was a pretty high number. And yeah, the fourth year of being in the school, and 32 points. Nobody had done that before. I think the previous record was 26. Did it against Lake City High School. And then I went to junior college and played 1 year, and then married Ann, and just played a little city ball for a couple of years, and that was about it. But always had a hoop in my backyard when my boys were growing up, and we'd shoot the hoop around. I'm embarrassed to say that right now I can't shoot a basketball 15 feet, but I was a pretty good free throw shooter back in the day. But no, I love basketball, and the Knowles win, the Michael Snare buzzer beaters, and it was just Ian Miller got a buzzer beater at Virginia Wise, and Snare got Virginia here again, and it's just some of the memories. 1978, Florida State wins the Metro Conference regular season, and we go up and play in the tournament. Louisville beats us on a buzzer beater, like by 1 point, 94, 93. Played at Cincinnati in that little arena they had up in Cincinnati, and here at the old Tully Gym, Florida State versus Virginia Tech. We've got them beat. All we need to do is make a free throw and miss the front end of a 1-and-1, and their guy grabs the ball and he throws it 93 feet 9 inches, and it goes through the hoop. And I'm sitting at Tully watching the ball go, oh. And he made it. And, Bobby Parks was a point guard, and we had Bobby was from Clearwater. I think Bobby still lives in Clearwater, and I'll never. He was at half court, just in case we miss. He's going to, try to. And I see Bobby down there watching it go over, and when it went through, he was like that. What? I can't believe it. But golly, those, that we didn't win the games, but I mean, those are highlights in a career that goes back to 1974, 75. Ed Littler retired a year ago, and that may have got me start thinking. He and I worked together, and then he got the cable television news and sports, and he finished his career, ironically, in Nebraska, covering the Nebraska Cornhuskers, and he retired maybe 2 years ago.
So let's talk about your broadcast team. You had them for a long time, as well as, if you would, share some of your thoughts about some of the voices you shared the mic with.
In basketball, there's an awful lot. I mean, back in the days when only WTNT would carry basketball, before we really networked basketball in 15, 18, 20 stations. Worked with Wayne Hogan. Wayne and I worked for about 9, 10 years, basketball. Mark Carlson worked a couple of years, sports information guys.
Yeah.
But they travel, they were, the expenses paid by the school. They do with their job with the media, and then set, with a microphone and do, for a number of years I did solo early on, and maybe for 2. And then Wayne left, and Jackie Pons worked a couple of years, and he was named principal of a middle school, had to get out of the broadcasting business, and Guy Morgan, I'm probably leaving out a few here, Randy Cable, who played for us, he did 1 year, and all of a sudden, I think Randy's wife said, you're out of town way too much, and he said 1 year was enough, and it's 20 years Keith Jones and I worked together, and Keith just, I wished I had the memory. Keith was our first 2-time academic All-American in football. We've had a couple since, but Keith was the first, and he would read the game notes, and 30 minutes he had everything memorized. It was incredible how he could recall that and throw it into the broadcast, which was so helpful. And then for the last 2 years, Adrian Crawford, another Florida State basketball player that played, his dad, Coleman Crawford, was an associate head coach for Steve Robinson. So Adrian and I have had a great 2 years. I've learned an awful lot about basketball working with Adrian, AC. I called Adrian when I knew the announcement was coming out, and I called all of my teammates and said, you're going to read or hear before you see it on Facebook, I'm retiring. I'm retiring, and everything's fine, good health, Ant's healthy, but it's time for me to step down. So I called all my teammates, and in football, 4 analysts that I've worked with. First, Bill Peterson, former head coach, a great head coach, and Bill, I'm not besmirching now. I'm sorry, Bill. I know, but Bill's been gone for a while. But we're playing, and Paul Porowski's been our starting linebacker for 3 years. This is his 4th year. And he says, yeah, that Perspikowski guy, he's about as good at tackling as I said, yeah, Paul Porowski just made that tackle, to sort of correct. Not to say, Coach, you're wrong, but oh golly, names were a problem for Coach. And, anyway, he was he was a Florida State Seminole, and whatever Bill said, you loved to hear. And so that was a big part of my first 2 or 3 years. Then he got that job down in Orlando at Central Florida as the director of athletics. And Vic Prinzi had been doing some cable TV, and he's a former Florida State football player, quarterback, from 54 through 58. And he joined me on the broadcast booth, and by golly, we started in 1981, and he came down with cancer in 97, and that finished his career. He passed in January of 1998. I still have his funeral card on my desk, and I look at it. Well, he was my best. I get more choked up talking about Victor than I do about anybody else. But then P.T. Willis came in. Yeah. And for 10 years, P.T., I see you. I said, I still use that. I see you. But P.T. played for the Seminoles, had a tremendous 1989 season, and everybody loves P.T. And don't ever play golf with him unless you got a big wallet, because he can actually play the game of golf better than football. And but P.T. in 98 and 1999 season, he did 10 years. His first game as color analyst was the game we played in '93, and it was up at the Meadowlands, and we played Kansas. And we had that great goal line stand, 8, 9 times inside the 3-yard line, and we kept getting penalized, and we kept it out and won that ball game. That was PT's first game with us, and I'll never forget, we played North Carolina State, maybe the second game that year or the third. We're playing up in Raleigh, and this soon-to-be Heisman Trophy winner, Chris Winkie, throws 6 interceptions. And boy, we said, that's got to be a school record. We look in the record book, and PT had thrown 6 in the game. So we didn't want to make too much noise about that, but PT led us to, at the end of his season in '89, he was as good a quarterback as there was in the country, and we were as good a team as there was in the country. We just didn't get it because we lost our first 2 games. But then when PT was through after 10 years, then William Barnum Floyd moved into the seat, and Barnum and I have had some great experiences, seen some tremendous wins. And Barnum, I said, you can't retire, Gene, you can't retire. It's going to be my 14th year. I said, I've got to step down, William, I've got to step down. So he will be breaking in a new voice of the Seminoles this year, and I hope that Barnum can do this for the next 25 years, I hope so.
Yeah, that'd be great. His son will be
his son's a walk-on. His daughter's now in the sports media business, and just worked for ESPN and was behind the mic in the Southwest Conference Athletic Conference basketball tournament. And tremendous. I texted Barnum. In fact, I clipped out the newspaper article and shipped it down to him on Saturday, because keep an eye on Ty, because Ty Floyd is going to take after Daddy, and daughter like Daddy, she's in the sports business now, and she's got some resume stuff, and you may see her on TV here soon,
Wow. Time passes, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
I can remember when Floyd's son would run around up there in the skybox.
Oh, yeah.
Little kid.
Yeah. Well, he's playing at Florida State now. That's the same guy.
Same guy.
His oldest son played baseball and had a scholarship at University of West Florida. Finished up down in Orlando, and I think he's out of athletics now.
Yeah. So, Gene, let's go way back. How did you get into broadcasting?
Way back. Well, I played basketball. And my mother and I used to keep scorecards of Braves baseball. We get the Atlanta Braves. They moved to Atlanta, and we would keep. Actually, it wasn't the Braves. It was. I'll tell you what it was. It was the Cleveland Indians, because we could get the flagship station 3WE out of Cleveland, a clear channel station at night, and we keep scorecards. My mother was a huge baseball fan, and I played Little League baseball throughout the arm, and started playing basketball in the 8th grade, and then. That's my sport, and I still love baseball, but basketball was my sport. And I got a job through basketball. I played junior college basketball, starting point guard, St. John's River Junior College, and the local radio station broadcast those games, home games. They didn't travel, but they broadcast home games, and the program director, John Tillman was his name, he came up to me after our final game, my freshman year, and he says, Gene, he says, I like watching you play basketball. He said, I understand you're on the debate team. I said, yes, sir, I am. He said, well, I know you can talk. Have you ever thought about being a radio announcer? not really. But he said, well, he says, I'd like to talk to you about it. I got some weekend work, you can work around going to college. And I said, well, I'm interested. And I had to go take the FCC exam in Tampa. Got up early on a Friday morning and drove down to Tampa from Palatka and did the exam, and I passed it. And so I got my FCC license. You don't have to do that anymore. You just have to show up, and if you don't have an arrest record, you can get a license. But maybe you get one now, even with an arrest record. I don't know. But then you had to have not just the license, but broadcast endorsed. So that was the tough part of the test. Element 9 was the tough part. That's how you had to read the meters and all this sort of stuff. And I passed, and so I started working weekends at WWPF in Palatka, Florida. And as a member of the staff, they had a Little League baseball game that one of the businesses in town, his son played on that Little League team, so he wanted to sponsor that game. And I broadcast the game. I knew nothing about this Little League team, and they didn't have names on the back of their jerseys. And so I don't know what the broadcast sounded like. I didn't record it, but it probably wasn't going to get me a job with the Atlanta Braves, okay? Right. And that was my first. And then we moved to Gainesville after I graduated from junior college. And all of a sudden, after my freshman year, not freshman year, close to my junior year ending, Ann and I expected our first child. So I said, well, you know what? I need to go out, stop playing student, smoking a pipe and typing up term papers. I better go out and get a job. And so I took a little resume tape that I built on a little portable recorder to 3 radio stations. And WRUF only hired students that were in the broadcast business. I was not. I was in international relations. Another station, a daytime station, they had an opening and it just filled it. And then WGGG, I did an audition, read a commercial, read a piece of news copy, and they hired me for a weekend announcer. And during that time, the play-by-play announcer, the late Jim Finch, who you may have heard of here, he got fired by new owners because he was doing rip and read news, and they wanted local news, and so anyway, boom, out the door, and they had basketball games still to be broadcasted. I knew basketball, so thank you, basketball, and WGGG, and so I did 6 games and graduated and left. But all of a sudden I had the itch, the urge to do this, and I never got the disc jockey out of it. I'd be driving down the road, listening to radios, and people would look over me and think I was crazy. I'd be talking, announcing the next record coming up, and we moved to Bradenton. I got a job, General Foods. We're expecting our 3rd child. I need another radio job as a radio to make some more income to, pay for the new baby. And went down to the local station and applied for a job and got a weekend job. I'd work 6 till midnight on Saturday and 6 a.m. till noon on Sunday. And, at $2.50 an hour, I was making a lot of money back then, okay? And that helped pay for the new baby, and that was Eric, our youngest son. And new owners came in again, just like at WGGG, firing people all over. And I learned something of the radio business for folks that want to be in the business. If new owners come in, get your resume tapes put together and start printing up those resumes, because generally you're not going to be there much longer. That's the way it goes. Yeah. But fortunately for me, new owners came in and they wanted local news, local sports, and they wanted local football, high school, local basketball. I knew basketball. I didn't know football, but so they said, okay, you'll do football with Dean Edwards, our news director, and you do basketball by yourself. Okay, fine. And so I did my first football game in 1972 for WTRL radio in Bradenton, Florida, and it was Manatee High versus somebody, I don't know. But that was our first game, and I did that first half, and then Dean would do the second. The next game, he'd do the first, I'd do the second. But I'd do all the basketball games, and even more irony to the whole story, the new owners of WTRL radio, the principal owner was named Bo Mitchell. And Bo had been the voice of the Florida State Seminole football on the radio for 9 seasons. Had broadcast the first win over Florida in 1964. And left Florida State, I want to say in when was Bo's last year? When Bob Shackleton took over, so I can't do the math right now. But Bo was the new owner, and we carried Florida State football on WTRL's air. It was the first, I think, station to ever carry Seminole football in the Bradenton, Sarasota area. And so I'd run the board on Saturday. I'd be listening to Bo Mitchell do the broadcast. And then Bo was let go. I want to say 73. I know it was 73 because 1973 the Seminoles went 0-11, and the new voice of the Florida State Seminole, he didn't last 43 years. He lasted one. His name was Skip Carey, the late Skip Carey, and I'll never forget, we're playing the Gators, and we're getting killed. And I'm on the board, we got a 4-line rotary. A 4-line rotary, for folks that don't know, a 4-line rotary, in this day and age, nobody, but you had 4 phone lines that came into your radio station, and if the one line was, you're talking about, the next line would go beep, and then the third line would go beep. All 4 lines lit up. It was all Seminole fans saying, "Who is that idiot telling us we're the worst team? We know it. We don't need our radio announcer telling us." And so every one of those called bing, 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 and I'm writing down names because you had to record your messages. And that was Skip's one and only season at Florida State. And then Bob Shackleton came in 74, 75, 76, 7, until 79. And then Bob had to take care of his alumni. He was vice president of alumni affairs, and so he stepped down from radio, and that's when I was selected by a selection committee. And it's funny, Jerry, it's when you put in a resume tape and you've got play-by-play from spring games, Garnet Gold games, from the previous 2 or 3 years. You've got names like Ron Simmons and Jimmy Jordan and Wally Woodham, Florida State players, and that's on your resume tape. The late Tom Mees was a finalist, one of 3 finalists, and he had Delaware Blue Hens, and there was not a single member of that 3-man selection committee that knew any name on that Delaware team. I'll promise you that. And then Craig Sager, the late Craig Sager, who left Fort Myers and moved to Atlanta, and the rest is history, a tremendous career covering NBA. Craig was the 3rd finalist. He had a resume tape of some high school football that he had done down in the Fort Myers area. And those were the 3 finalists. I had an edge up. One, I was doing television at Channel 6, so a lot of folks said, well, that's the sport guy, Channel 6. And then I had a resume tape of play-by-play with Florida State players. So I had a leg up, I think, on the other 2 fellas and got the job. And plus I was doing basketball and got the job. And that's the story of first broadcast Little League game in Palatka, Florida, right on the St. Johns River, 50 miles from Jacksonville. My first radio job, and becoming the voice of the Seminoles in football in 1979. The basketball job, when I was hired by WTNT, they told me they wanted me to come up and do Florida State football and Florida State basketball. And the football job was Bob's, and there was no way they were going to make a change. And so I began my career doing basketball and not football. And then when Bob stepped down, the football job, the 3 finalists and all that worked out. And then what year was it? 1979, 1983, I had done USFL football for the, don't fast forward too much, but I want to talk mostly about Florida State. But Vic Pringe and I were doing Florida State football when the USFL came into being, and a great Florida State alum, Burt Reynolds, was part owner of the Bandits, and Vic wanted the job to work with Burt, and then he said, Gino, you do. So I submitted an application to do the play-by-play, and I was named play-by-play voice of the Tampa Bay Bandits. And Vic and I were the team, and we get to see Burt about every 3rd game. He'd come up and we'd interview him in the press box at halftime, and he'd sit in and do a little play-by-play with us, and it was all good. And then Channel 6 said I was missing too much time. I was doing Florida State football, Florida State basketball. I was doing USFL football, and they said, you gotta give up something. And so I went to Coach Bridges, and I told him, I think I'm gonna have to. I didn't want to, but I said, I've got to. Basketball is only on 1 station. The USFL only had about 25 stations. Seminole Network had about 39 stations at that time. And he said, no, I want you to do both. And so he said, Andy Miller hired me to produce Coach Bowden's TV show. And that was 1983. They hired me. I left Channel 6 and became, they called me Director of Electronic Media, I think was the title that Andy Miller gave me. And so I sold the advertising, I bought the TV time, I got the program distributed. It's funny, Randy Orovitz was assistant trainer for Florida State. He's going to the FSU Athletics Hall of Fame the night before the spring game. And Randy used to pick up the tape at Channel 6 at 8 o'clock in the morning and drive to Jacksonville. And he would take that tape to the Jacksonville station that carried Bobby's show, and they would feed that show down the line because NBC had a line going all the way down to Miami and over to Orlando to Tampa, and that's how we distributed the show. And then we had a great Seminole booster in Pensacola, and one in Panama City that would go down to the Greyhound station. I'd take the tape of the show, and they would pick it up at Greyhound and get it to our affiliates in Panama City and Pensacola. That's how we did. Then we got the satellite. Thank you, satellites. And so as soon as we finished the taping the show, we'd stick it in the box. And so by doing I was able to do USFL football, Florida State basketball, Florida State football. Thank you, John Bridges, and Andy Miller. I texted Andy. He texted me and said, I'm sorry to see you retiring a great run and some other stuff. And I said, well, Andy, you and I go back to 1975, and everything I've done in my career is probably a direct result of what you were able to do. And so that's, and then Bobby saying, I'll do my TV show anytime you want to do it. It enabled me to do NFL football. But the fact that I did USFL, for some reason, it was even though it was a new league for 3 years, and 20 games a season, 60 games, people still remembered me broadcasting Tampa Bay Bandits football. And I was offered a job in '89 to do the Buccaneers, and that's when Coach agreed to do his TV show at 2 or 3 in the morning, so I could get on a plane and fly to do, which is a story that I think has not been told enough. Bobby, and it's like I mentioned in my note to Ann the other night when I let her know I was retiring. I said, without Bobby, I would have never had the career that I've had. And obviously, I think the connection between NFL, college football, the market itself, Tampa's huge, a lot of Seminoles, particularly Pinellas County, statewide, that it's been a symbiotic relationship that has been bigger and better and bigger and better and bigger and better. And it's going to still continue. It's going to still continue, but it'll be mostly oriented toward that Sunday afternoon game or Monday night game or Thursday night game. Now the times here we get 5 prime timers.
Yeah. So it's interesting. Tell the story of you going into Bowden and saying you had a conflict and him adopting.
Well, it wasn't a conflict. I mean, it was definitely, I had to do the TV show, and that was an incredible day. We had a sponsor that had a convention in Clearwater Beach, Dairy Farmers Associates. They still sponsor the Player of the Year, and they've got other marketing things, but it was they have a huge Florida sponsor, and but they sponsored a half a minute on Coach Bowden's show, and I represented Bobby at the convention. And I also drank a glass of milk at the convention. I really did. I did. But I'm at the convention. It's in Clearwater, and the flagship station for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers wanted to interview me, so I went across to do the little interview. Went to the station, and got back to the hotel, and it was 5 o'clock, 5:15, and I had Coach Bowden had flown to Jacksonville to do some television commercials for one of our sponsors. And it was part of the contract. We get Coach Bowden to do our commercials, and we'll buy a full minute of the show, which was, at that time, a substantial amount of money. And so they'd also had the Florida Gator coach and the University of Georgia coach. And so I said, okay, we'll send Coach over on he'll be over there on like Thursday, I think it was. And I'll fly him over on a little plane, and we'll get, what time does he need? We need him here by 7 o'clock. All right, so I said, Coach, and Coach is an early riser. I mean, getting up at 4:30, 5 o'clock was nothing to Coach. He was up reading the Bible at 5 o'clock in the morning. I mean, the bright light was on in his office at his house. But he said, okay. And so he flies over to Jacksonville to do these commercials. I told him he'd be home by 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So it's 5 o'clock. I figured Bobby's already home. This is before cell phones. And Bobby's not home. I call, Ann answers the phone. She said, well, Gene, he told me he'd be home about 3 o'clock, and I haven't heard from him. I guess he's okay. I said, well, I'm sure he's okay. They're always slow. I said, Bobby's going to be the first coach of the 3, and they're always behind, so I'll call back in an hour. So I call back at 6. Bobby's still not there. I said, well, Ann, I'm going to call you one more time, but I'm sure he's okay. And so I called back about 7:30, quarter to 8 maybe. And she said, Gene, I'm getting worried because Bobby's not home. So I'm going to call that ad agent tomorrow. I'm going to find out exactly what went on, blah, 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 blah. And she said, Gene, hold on a second. I hear somebody in the driveway. And it was Bobby. Now, Bobby's supposed to have been home at 3:15, 3 o'clock, something like that. And he was not a happy man. And he said, do you know what, Coach? He said, what? We said, well, I very seldom call Coach at home. He said, well, you call, what do you need? And I told him on the phone. I said, I've been offered a job to do NFL football for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And he says, well, Gene, he says, you still going to do our games? I said, yeah. They got a computer. I'd never seen a computer, you know. They showed me the airline schedule and all that to get me from Tallahassee, Florida to where the Bucks were playing football. And I said, yes, sir, I'm going to keep it. Well, why do you have to call me? And I said, because we may have to do your TV shows at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. So I can either drive to Tampa or get on a plane and fly to where they're playing. And Jerry, without hesitation, Bobby said, Gene, I think it's great you could do our games and NFL games. And he said, I'll do that TV show anytime you want to. Just keep me awake during the commercials. And so that began the 1989 season of Florida State and Tampa Bay football for Gene. And it's been that way ever since. Ann retired 10 years ago, and she and I drive to Tampa for home games. And she drives halfway. And when you get home at 3 o'clock in the morning after a game in Charlottesville, Virginia, she'll drive the first leg of the trip to Crystal River, and then I'll get up and drive the second leg, and then we'll come back home. Back in the day before Ann retired, we drove down and then drove back on Sundays because Ann had to be to work at the Leon County Tax Collector's office, and so it was long weekends for Ann. And she'd watch TV out in the motorhome, and she wouldn't come to the game. She'd watch TV in the motorhome and take a little nap, and then we'd drive home and dodge deer in Levy County when it was dark. I mean, they're on both sides of the road down there. But when Ann retired, we started staying overnight down in Tampa and driving home on Mondays. And Bobby's TV show was on Thursdays, as I recall. Jimbo's was on Wednesday, his talk show. And the new era is get everything on Monday night, and so we'd have to leave early in the morning to get home Monday to do the talk shows. But
I got one last question about broadcasting.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody's...
There's 5 words you can't say, or you get fired, and you go into sports writing. That's my story, and I'm sticking with it.
Hey, Gene, everybody's...
That's not a shot at you, Jerry. I mean, come on.
Everybody's enamored by your enthusiasm and energy, but I know how much work you put into on the back end. I mean, people don't have any idea.
No.
What's the average number of hours
you
put in to one opponent and one broadcast?
Yeah, well, you know what? You start when the schedule comes out. Like right now, I know who Tampa Bay is playing, and I know who Florida State playing. So the schedule is, you do, the ACC schedule comes out, and so when I'm on a basketball trip, I'm doing what I call matchups. That's last year's stats for our team and last year's stats for the opponent's team. The coach, a little biography, notes, and that, and then a summary of games that we played over the last 6-7 years. And in basketball, I've got summaries on my matchup sheets going all the way back to 1991-92 season. And had to condense them, make a smaller font, but it tells you, so-and-so made a 6 to none run or something like that, and we out-rebound. Anyway, but so you start doing that in February. Then the NFL schedule comes out around the draft, usually in late April, early May, late April this year. And so but you know who you're playing. Yeah. The schedule's already been set. You just don't know what date you're playing. And so you start building those matchups, and of course the template, the Buccaneer stuff is already done after the first one, but the opponents, and it used to be in the old days, you played in the NFC Central, you had, 5 teams in each division. Now there's only 4, but no, so you had the Bucks, you had Tampa Bay, you had Chicago, Detroit, Green Bay, Minnesota. Yeah, there were 5. But you played, so there were 4 teams you played twice. That was 8 of your 16, half of your games. So you only had to do 4 matchups for those 4 teams. Then they reduced it to a 4-team division, so you had 3 opponents: Atlanta, New Orleans, Carolina, and then you still had 16 and now 17. And so you start building those matchups, and then sometimes you go back 3 years because the schedule rotates, just like the ACC. And you got the old ones, and they've always changed a new Microsoft version, so you got to convert it and all that. But you do start by doing that, and then in college, generally the spring practice, you get a little depth chart. Now you don't. Not many people put out charts anymore for the spring, but you start building the little depth charts, and it's a work in progress. Then during the season, you'd finish up your work here, and when you're traveling, you'd be looking ahead. And it's, many times on an NFL broadcast, I've called a guy's name from the next team that we're playing because I've been working on that the day before. I'd drive the RV to Joe Campbell Stadium and get there 4 hours early and turn the TV on to watch the ABC games and turn the radio on to listen to an ESPN game, and I'd be typing away doing some stuff for the following week's NFL game. I mean, that's I'd say anywhere from 6 to 8 hours of actual sitting at the desk and typing depth charts, updating stats, doing the matchups, then watching video. That if you add that into it, and the NFL Game Pass you buy, and you can look at every game that's played in the NFL, and so you look at that, and you watch Monday Night Football, you watch Thursday Night Football, and you watch, it's just, if you add it all up, it's 8 to 10 hours for one game. Right. And so you're looking at, 16 to 20 hours of just preparation, and the travel included, and the actual play-by-play. And yeah, it's you got a 40-hour week before you go to work. Yeah, basically, maybe a 50-hour week before you actually work. Right. And it's but then that's part of the game. I mean, that's some people might not work that hard at it, but I've never done a game that I haven't worked that hard.
You make it look easy.
I don't know about that. But anyway, that's the way I do it now. I talked to had the distinct fortune to have dinner, a barbecue dinner with Al Michaels and his bride, and my wife and myself at a National Sports Writers Association, now National Sports Media Association. And it was the second night, and we were sitting together, and Al was doing at that time Monday Night Football. And it was interesting to me because I know what goes into broadcast and what you have to do to prepare. And it amazed me. He says, Gene, he says, I get the videotape packet on Tuesday. He says, and I've got the producer's notes by Wednesday. He says, and they've got things that I need to look at on the tape. I mean, these 3 or 4, 5, 6 guys at ABC or ESPN saying, this is what we're looking for. This is how we're going to broadcast. You got guys getting paid a lot of money producing these Monday night, Sunday night football games. And he says, so I look at the videotape. He said, I'm on my sofa and I'm watching the tape, and I'm just thinking, my goodness gracious, number one, I can't get college footage unless I record it on my DVR because it's just not available. At least the NFL, you get the NFL Game Pass. But and I do record some games too. But he said, yeah, I got a stack of tapes. I look at the last 3 or 4 games. He says, and then I get the producer's notes, and then they fly me to wherever the game's going to be played. He said, I get there on Friday afternoon. They have it set up with the offensive and defensive coordinators, the head coach, the quarterback, and top defensive players, and they just come right in. He said, John and I, we just sat there, and the next guy comes in, and I make a few notes, and by then you're pretty well prepared to do the broadcast. So that's access that radio, local network, Florida State Seminole Network, even Buccaneers Radio Network access you don't have. We have access to our coach, but not the other coach. I mean, they're not going to tell you a word. But it amazed me the amount of work that is handled and put in front of your top announcers. And to me, Al's the best in the business. I know he's talking about a new contract here and there, and wherever he goes, I think I'll follow because he is the ultimate technician when it comes to the broadcast he does. And every time I see Al, we always, when the Dodgers were being sold, he was doing we were doing a preseason. I know it was a preseason in St. Louis Rams. Tampa Bay Buccaneers. It was hot. I know. I think I had shorts on. I was just getting to the hotel. Elevator opens up and it's Al, and so I was going up like the next floor, and anyway, I get on the elevator. So what a coincidence! And he says, you got to do the Dodgers now. And I said, what do you? I didn't even know the Dodgers were. What do you mean, Al? He said, well, the Dodgers, they're getting sold. The new owners, you're gonna do them and the Bucks too, because the Glazers were going to buy the team. Oh yeah. See, Malcolm Glazer came that close to owning the Los Angeles Dodgers, and so that tells you how long ago it's been. Because Mr. G's passed away a long time ago. But yeah, he asked, you going to do the Dodgers now too? Because he knows Florida State, and we last crossed paths, and I didn't see him at the Sunday night game in Tampa, but I did see him because their press box was right next to our press box, broadcast booth, I should say, in New England. So I saw him. We're at the same age where we have to know where that men's room is on a regular basis, and so twice we crossed paths going back and forth. But he always asks about Florida State. Obviously, always asks about Tampa Bay. But that's been he at least he knows that I do a couple of games a week. There's 3 of us still. Now there's down to 2. Dan coached Cincinnati Bengals, Cincinnati Bearcats. and who, by the way, both of his teams had phenomenal seasons. Didn't they? The Bearcats, did they win their bowl game? I'm not sure, but they won their conference, and I think they won their bowl game. And then Cincinnati obviously plays in Super Bowl 56. So Dan had a great run this year, and Bill Hillgrove's a little on the downs because number one, the Pittsburgh Panthers, well, they won the ACC this year in football. Had a horrible basketball season, but then his Pittsburgh Steelers have not done very well lately. And Ben Roethlisberger's retiring, stepping down, and who knows, but Bill's still doing it, and golly, he's a little older than me, but his trip from his home to where the Steelers and the Heinz Field, I guess it is, where they play, is probably about 28 minutes, and my trip's about 4.5 hours.
Yeah.
So anyway, I think Dan's about the same boat. Maybe I think I asked Dan once before we played the Bengals a preseason game up at Cincinnati a couple of years ago. He said he's about 20 minutes away. So it's sure a big difference between 20 minutes and 4.5 hours. Yeah. But anyway, those are the only two guys that I know that still do a college game and a pro game. Now, Bob Wischusen, great announcer. I consider a good friend, you know, through the business. I mean, we don't knock on each other's doors on Sunday and say, you know, let's go to church together, okay? But he lives in New York, I live in Tallahassee, so that's impossible to do. But he does an ESPN game on Saturday, and then we'll do the New York Jets game on Sunday. And a couple of weird games in the last couple of seasons. I don't know how he got from one place to the other, but somebody told me that either ESPN or the Jets were doing remote, so that's how they did it. I'll tell you another. The pandemic itself put even more pressure, but just put more weight on your shoulders to do the games. And we did all remote Florida State games, all remote Tampa Bay Buccaneer games.
Yeah.
Home games were at the stadium, away games were at the stadium. And that was a long season, a 2020 season. 2021, we came back and traveled with the football team. The broadcast crew still doesn't travel with the Buccaneers. They still fly commercial and get to the game a night before and then come home. If you can't make a flight to Tampa, they get on a flight, get home the next day. But which caused some issues. But of course, I don't fly on the team plane. I haven't flown on the team plane for probably 20 years. Derek Brooks was still playing football when I stopped flying on the team plane. You know, Derek would separate me and Warren Sapp because Sapp would always brag about especially the week of the Miami-Florida State game. It was, the connection between Florida State and Tampa Bay for me has just been, I mean, you had Warwick Dunn, you had Derek Brooks, you had Dexter Jackson, MVP of the Super Bowl, Super Bowl 37. I mean, you know, from Quincy. I went to the parade when Quincy celebrated Dexter Jackson, MVP of the Super Bowl. I videotaped that parade on my video camera. I have nothing to play it on now, but I've got memories of that parade. But I mean, and there were a number of other Florida State players that played on that team. And, you know, now there is not a single Seminole player on the Buccaneers. And how about this? There's not well, let me think. Oh yeah, we do have Kyle Trask, but he is the only Florida Gator on that team. And we don't have a Miami Hurricane on the Buccaneers. When we won the Super Bowl in 2002, it was January 2003, Super Bowl 37, we had 4 Seminole starters on that Super Bowl championship team. Right. And I was at a store one day, and an older fellow came up to him and introduced himself. He said, "I sure like listening to you on the radio." He says, "I'm a Jacksonville Jaguar fan. What's it going to take for my Jaguars to win a Super Bowl?" And I said, without hesitation, I said, "What you need to have is 4 Florida State players that start for the Jaguars, and you will win a Super Bowl." And I don't think they have 4 Seminoles on that roster, to be honest with you. I'm trying to think. Rashad Green was on this roster, but I think his career is done.
Todd Fordham was.
Todd was pretty on that, but he didn't have 4 starters that were Seminoles. Let alone how about the
Greg Jones?
That's right. Greg now represents their team. He's got a front office job with the Jaguars. You're right about that. Okay, but they didn't have 4, and they didn't have 4. When you think of the 4, you had Brad Johnson, you had Derek Brooks, you had the Crane, and I'm a defensive end here, and I'm having a
monkey. Greg Spires.
Greg Spires was the Crane, and then Dexter Jackson. Those are the 4.
Yeah. Gene, one last question. Every fan out there that's watching this is, they've grown up with you as the West.
Well, 48 years, yeah.
They've loved you. You've been a part of their experience. What would you like to say to them?
Keep on cheering those Noles and get that elbow warmed up, because that war chant is going to be flowing all fall long. And don't miss a basketball game at the Donald L. Tucker Civic Center. With those injuries are a thing of the past. Look at this, Miami. They had 6 scholarship players last year because of injuries. They're in the Sweet 16. You know, the Noles are going to be back at basketball. And hey, Mike Martin Jr. is going to take us to the promised land and beat somebody bad and win the College World Series. I just feel like that's in the future of Florida State. Mike Norvell's doing a tremendous job. Leonard is Leonard, and Meat is going to do his thing. And I think back of all the great times we spent together, and it's like I told Rob. I said it's like a novel that played out on the radio dial. And God bless Florida State, and God bless Seminole fans. You have been great to me, and I certainly hope the Noles have bene great to you.
Gene, thanks so much.
All right, dear.